Buenos Aires. How to ruin a city. In 1913, Argentina was one of the 10 wealthiest countries on Earth, richer than France, richer than Germany, almost twice as prosperous as Spain. Buenos Aires was so synonymous with extravagance that the French had a phrase for it: riche comme un Argentin, rich like an Argentine. When Harrods, the most famous department store in the world, decided to open its first overseas branch, it did not choose Paris. It did not choose New York. It chose Buenos Aires. This was a city that had everything: fertile land, a deep water port, a flood of European immigrants, and the ambition to match. A city that looked, to anyone paying attention in 1910, like it was on the verge of becoming one of the great metropolises of the modern world. It did not become that. And the story of why is one of the most studied and most repeated failures in economic history. These are Buenos Aires' notes on how to ruin a city. Step 1. Let politics eat the economy. Repeat until nothing is left. For the first 3 decades of the 20th century, Argentina ran more or less as intended. The Pampas, the vast, impossibly fertile grasslands stretching out from Buenos Aires, fed the world. Beef, wheat, wool. The port of Buenos Aires handled the exports and became one of the busiest in the southern hemisphere. Millions of immigrants arrived from Italy and Spain, bringing skills and energy and a hunger to build something. Then, in 1930, the military took over. That first coup set a template that would define the next 50 years. Between 1930 and 1983, Argentina experienced 6 military coups and 6 military dictatorships. In that same period, the country cycled through 347 different heads of state. The average term lasted under 19 months. 19 months! In a country that needed decades of consistent policy to realize its potential, no government lasted long enough to finish what it started. The most consequential figure to emerge from this chaos was Juan Perón, who came to power in 1946 on a wave of working-class support, with his charismatic wife, Eva, at his side. Perón genuinely improved conditions for Argentina's poor. Wages rose, a welfare state was built, unions were empowered. But the economics behind it were not sustainable. Perón nationalized industries, closed the economy to outside competition, and spent far beyond what the country produced. When the bills came due and the economy stuttered, his response was to print money. Inflation followed, then stagnation, then another coup. What followed Perón was a cycle that Argentina has never fully escaped. A new government arrives. It promises stability. It borrows heavily to finance that stability. The debt becomes unmanageable. Inflation spirals. The government collapses. A new government arrives. The French economist Simon Kuznets, who won the Nobel Prize, was said to have observed that throughout history, there are 4 kinds of countries: developed, underdeveloped, Japan, and Argentina. The joke was that Argentina defied every model because it kept finding new ways to undo its own advantages. By 1975, real per capita income had fallen to less than half that of the United States. A country that had been nearly level with Canada in 1913 had fallen a generation behind. And the worst was still ahead. Step 2. Default. Repeat. Default again. In December 2001, Buenos Aires ran out of money. Not slowly, not gradually. The economy simply collapsed. Within the space of 2 weeks, 5 different presidents resigned. Citizens went to their banks and found the doors locked. The government had frozen all accounts to stop a run on the peso. People took to the streets with pots and pans, banging them outside the presidential palace in what became known as the cacerolazo. Unemployment reached 21.5%. Poverty topped 45%. 7 out of every 10 children in Argentina were below the poverty line at the depth of the crisis. The government defaulted on $93 billion in sovereign debt, the largest default in history at that point. It was not Argentina's first default. It was not its last. Since independence from Spain in 1816, Argentina has defaulted on its sovereign debt 9 times. 9. The most recent was in 2020. Every generation of Argentines has lived through at least one. Most have lived through several.
Each default follows the same rhythm, a period of optimism and growth. Governments borrow heavily on the back of that optimism. Global conditions tighten or commodity prices fall. The debt becomes unpayable. The currency collapses. Savings are wiped out. Poverty spikes. Then the cycle resets and begins again. The cruelty of this pattern is what it does to ordinary people in Buenos Aires. A middle-class family that saved diligently through the 1990s found their bank accounts converted from dollars to pesos at an artificially favorable rate in 2002, then watched that new peso lose most of its value within months. Life savings built over decades, gone inside a year. That happened not once, but repeatedly across generations. The rational response, which most Argentines have adopted, is not to save in the local currency at all, not to trust the banking system, not to make long-term plans in a country where the ground keeps shifting. By 2024, inflation had reached 211% annually. The following year, it began to fall sharply under the radical economic program of the new president, Javier Milei. But poverty still stood at roughly 36% of the population. In a country that was once richer than France, more than a third of the population cannot reliably cover its basic needs. Step 3. Build the walls. Both kinds. Stand in the right part of Buenos Aires, and you will think you are in Paris. The wide boulevards, the ornate facades, the cafe culture, the tango drifting out of a bar at midnight. It is one of the most beautiful cities in the world. And directly adjacent to those boulevards, sometimes within a single city block, are the Villas Miseria. The phrase translates, without softening, as misery village. There are more than 6,400 of them across Argentina. The Villas of Buenos Aires house hundreds of thousands of people, roughly 10% of the city's population, in settlements that have existed for nearly a century and show no sign of shrinking. In these neighborhoods, 92% of residents have no access to a formal drinking water supply. 97% are not connected to a sewage system. Life expectancy is 11 years shorter than the national average. Only 27% of young people complete secondary school. The Villas did not appear overnight. They began during the Great Depression, when immigrants with nowhere to go settled in whatever space they could find. Successive governments tried, in various ways, to make them disappear. Through forced relocation, through bulldozers, through boundary laws that pushed residents just far enough outside the city limits that they were no longer Buenos Aires' problem. The residents always returned. The Villas always grew back. In 2009, the affluent Buenos Aires suburb of San Isidro began constructing a 3-meter concrete wall along its border with the poorer municipality of San Fernando. The stated reason was security. Local residents tore the wall down within days. A court-ordered construction halted. The Argentine press called it the Wall of Discord. The physical wall came down. The economic wall between those two worlds never did. This is what a century of political instability and repeated economic collapse produces in a city. Not just poverty, but an entrenched geography of it.
A city divided so sharply between the formal and the informal, the prosperous and the precarious, that the two populations inhabit what are effectively different cities within the same one, with different infrastructure, different services, different life expectancies, and different futures. The uncomfortable mathematics. Argentina has some of the most fertile agricultural land on Earth. It has a deep water port that gives it direct access to global markets. It has a well-educated professional class and a capital city of extraordinary cultural richness. By any reasonable accounting of natural advantages, Argentina should be among the wealthiest countries in the world. In 1860, economists calculated that Argentina would need around 55 years to reach the income level of Switzerland. Today, on its current trajectory, that estimate is more than 90 years. A country that spent the 19th century catching up to the developed world spent the 20th century falling behind it. Not because of geography, not because of a lack of resources, because of a political culture that prioritized short-term power over long-term stability, and because every generation inherited the consequences of the generation before it, without ever quite managing to break the pattern. Somewhere in Buenos Aires tonight, the cafes are full, the tango is playing, and the city is alive in the way that only Buenos Aires can be. And somewhere a few blocks away, a family is cooking over a gas canister in a settlement that has been there for 80 years and will be there for 80 more. Buenos Aires, the gold standard for turning a world-class city into a cautionary tale. One bad decision at a time.